day 3 of our Road to the Draft Combine show, brought to you by Southeast Michigan Ford Dealers. I'm your host, Tori Petry. Yesterday, we took a look at the running backs and offensive linemen of this year's draft, as well as took you behind the scenes of the combine process as we sat down with Vice President of Player Personnel, Kyle O'Brien. That episode is up on DetroitLions.com in case you missed it. But we are back today with another episode. Today, the wide receivers, tight ends, and quarterbacks worked out on the field after speaking at the podiums yesterday. Here are all of the press conference highlights.
I've always been, I've always tried to be a physical person. I wasn't in high school just because I didn't know how. I didn't know how to use my body. At the University of Iowa, I figured it out. The feeling you get when you make a good block, when you do something with the tackle and the tight end, when you do, you go to the second level, you do different things. It's really cool. I mean, it's because as a line. It's 5 guys, and then when a Y or a F or whatever you have gets in line, it's a team. You're all talking, you're all a unit, and you're working up. You're working somewhere, and I think, being able to do that as a team and as multiple people is really cool.
I mean, first of all, off the field, I'm somebody who is going to do everything right. I'll never miss a meeting, never miss a lift, never cause any issues. I think I do a good job of making the contested catch. Hands have gotten a lot better, and I'm not afraid to, throw my face in there and block. So I think that I'm really working on just being a complete tight end.
High volume man, definitely, because it just makes it literally man on man. So it's just me and you out here, and I feel like me against anybody else, I'm gonna win that matchup more times than not.
One key is to just go in and just work from day one, just show everybody around that I'm not here to play games. This isn't college anymore, it's a business, so I'm here to win. Every team room I walk into, they're always like, wow, you are really that big. So,
I would say Golden Tate. He's just physical. He's great with the ball in his hands.
The opportunity of a lifetime. It's something everybody don't get the chance to be able to do. And even with dealing that I got injured, I still got the opportunity to come out here. So taking advantage of every opportunity I get.
Joining me now to break down all of the action from yesterday is Tim Twentyman from DetroitLions.com. Tim, the hot topic amongst Lions fans is the tight end position. Can the Lions draft a tight end at pick number 8? Why or why not?
Sure. I think you have to trust your board as a GM. And look, this is a position of need. You guys might not like it, but it is, and at number 8, I think it's a real possibility. Look, Michael Roberts is the only tight end with any kind of real experience on the roster right now. Darrell Bevel's offense is a really balanced offense that wants to run, pass, and I think you need a multiple type tight end that can do both. And look, this is an extremely deep, talented tight end class, and I think there's 3 guys at the top, TJ Hawkinson, Noah Fant, and Irv Smith Jr. that I think are kind of first-round type talents. And look, if Bob Quinn has his board together, and at number 8, TJ Hawkinson is by far the top player available, I think you have to trust your board at a position of need. And so I think it certainly makes sense. And maybe Detroit fans don't want to hear that because of what happened with Eric Ebron and all these other things, but Bob Quinn can't worry about a personnel decision that was made a half decade ago, and when he wasn't here. This is his roster, his team. He's filling his needs. And so if a tight end is there at number 8, if it's Noah Fant, Hawkinson, Irv Smith Jr., whoever it is, I think it makes sense. And, Bob said this week that he's not ruling out any position, tight end included. And so, we mentioned the top 3. I mean, Noah Fant had a terrific 40-yard dash time, 4.51 for a guy who was 6'5", 247 pounds or whatever it was. Yeah, and so, those 3 guys are really impressive, but then you look, let's say they don't want to do it at number 8. They want to take a defender or somebody else. I think this is an extremely deep class that you can find some terrific guys in day 2. Guys like Tommy Sweeney, Dawson Knox, Chase Sternberger, Foster Moreau, who also ran a really nice 40 time here at the Combine for a guy his size. I mean, Caden Smith, Caleb Wilson, who also ran fast. I mean, there's a ton of guys. There could be 7 or 8 tight ends in the top 100 picks. So if Bob doesn't want to take one at number 8, I think day 2, second round, third round, even early in day 3, there are going to be some terrific tight ends in this class so they can fill that need.
I think that's a really good point about Bob Quinn not being able to worry about decisions that were made before him and things that didn't work out that happened before him, because this is a different team. It's a different regime that's calling the shots there on draft day, and it's a totally different situation. Now, Lions fans have a memory in their minds of what they wanted back in 2014 and an impression of how they want this to go, but it's just a different situation, and I think that that's important to remember.
It is, and the bad thing about the Eric Ebron pick at number 10 is it wasn't Eric Ebron was a bad player.
No.
Eric Ebron was a good player, and he was a good player in Indianapolis, and good for him. It was just the fact that some guys selected after him just so happened to be terrific guys, and that affected Eric Ebron his entire stay here in Detroit.
And it was never Eric Ebron's fault that he got picked where he got picked.
Never. And so I think if you're Bob Quinn and his staff, you just have to trust your board. TJ Hawkinson is a terrific player. And you watch his tape, he's explosive. And I don't mean just catching the ball. He is probably the most explosive edge run blocker at the tight end position. We've seen it since maybe Rob Gronkowski. And so there's a guy that fits, And so if he's on that board and if he's by far the top player on that board at number 8, it's a position of need, you take it. And that's just how football works, and you build your roster. And so you have to trust your board. You have to trust the evaluation. If it's a tight end, it's a tight end. It's the best player available.
Certainly. Well, if we're talking about a tight end at 8, it's probably TJ Hawkinson. But you mentioned a couple of other first-round tight ends there. Are the Lions in play for those? What situation would have to happen for them to, end up with a guy like Noah Fant?
Well, I think, it depends on what happens with the quarterbacks. If you move back, then I think you're probably in a position for a guy like a Noah Fant. I think the way he ran here at the Combine, we'll see what his pro days and some of the other numbers are, but I think he probably put himself in the first-round conversation, certainly, especially running that 4.51. So, I think it's TJ Hawkinson at number 8, but maybe the evaluation of Noah Fant, he rises up some boards. I know he said yesterday that him and Hawkinson have a little bit of a friendly rivalry. He wants to be the first tight end off the board. I just think the combo with Hawkinson blocking, I think he's a more complete tight end. So I think he's probably the one that makes the most sense at 8. You never know how the evaluation process goes over the next 2 months. But I think a different situation where maybe Irv Smith Jr. and Noah Fant are in play for the Lions is if for some reason somebody wants to come up, one of those quarterbacks is there, and the Lions move back into the teens, maybe the 20s. Then I think maybe Irv Smith Jr. and Noah Fant are in play there. Probably not at number 8. It's either Hawkinson or you look to day 2. That's just how I see it right now, but it could change.
Sure. Well, we've talked a lot about tight ends. Hopefully you're still with us here. Let's turn the page now to wide receivers. Now, this is a position of need for the Lions as well after trading wide receiver Golden Tate in the middle of the season last year. I'd say it's probably that they're looking for more of a guy who can play in the slot, who's more of a shifty guy who can make defenders miss because they have Marvin Jones Jr. and Kenny Golladay. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think a guy that can separate, a guy that can make plays after the catch, which Golden was so good at. I think when you talk about, Marv and Kenny, they're guys that are bigger bodied, great at high pointing the ball. They, don't get a ton of separation, don't make a ton of big plays after the catch. Now, Kenny showed a little bit of that last year, but I think one of those quick, shifty, Golden Tate type slot receivers is probably in play. And the great thing for the Lions is this draft is chock full of them. We saw a few guys down at the Senior Bowl, and we talked to them there. But I mean, guys like Marquise Brown. Now with him, he was very productive at Oklahoma, but has the Lynn Frank injury, had surgery. Don't know how much he'll be able to do before the draft. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe he drops back to day 2, and he's a guy that's available there. I think he's one of the most explosive receivers in this draft, the cousin of Antonio Brown, so he's got those good bloodlines. But guys like Paris Campbell, Deebo Samuel, who I know we both talked to at the Senior Bowl, Penny Hart, Andy Isabella, these are all kind of slot type receivers, very good at getting separation, very good at making plays after the catch. And I think if you're the Lions, that's probably more the receiver you're looking at, and this is a great draft for some of those guys.
Certainly. Well, before we close out here, let's talk a little bit about the quarterback position. Now, I did an Instagram Q&A yesterday, and I got a lot of questions. Are the Lions going to take a quarterback this year? Now, Bob Quinn has said he likes to take one every couple of years and hasn't done that in a bit, but the Lions could take a quarterback. I just don't think it's happening in the first round, but since we're talking about quarterbacks, what do you think of the first-round quarterbacks?
Well, I like him. I think Kyler Murray the measurements fit with him, and that was the big deal coming in. He got 5'10", he was 207, a little bit heavier than Russell Wilson, only a half-inch shorter, eighth of an inch or whatever it was, a little shorter than him. So I think the measurables are good there. You look at his tape, he's explosive. I think this regime is all in on Matthew Stafford.
I agree.
And so, I think they're more in the market of a day 2, maybe a third round type guy. If they have a guy who's really high on their board who fits, maybe possibly even day 3. We've seen Bob Quinn do that a couple times now with Brad Kaya and the kid from
Jake
Michigan.
Rudock,
thank you. So I think that's more in line. Jared Cook is on the roster right now. They picked him up on a futures deal. That's about it, And so I wouldn't be surprised at all if we see Matt Castle back, a veteran guy. They go get one in free agency, and then maybe get that developmental guy that we've seen with Bob that you can maybe kind of try to work up and become an asset and develop in your system. But because of some of the other holes, because I think this is a team that's got some nice young pieces, and I think they're looking to take the next step, I don't see it in the first round, probably not the second round. I think they want to fill some of their other holes.
Yes.
You never know. Like you said, if one's there and he's the number one guy on the board, maybe. But I just don't see it. I think they're probably more in play for a developmental guy at quarterback.
Who gets picked first on draft day, Dwayne Haskins or Kyler Murray?
Great question. I think it's going to be Kyler Murray now.
Really?
Yeah, I do. I think he kind of checked off some of the boxes that teams wanted, and I think his ability to make plays with his legs. He was only the second player ever to throw for 4,000 yards and rush for 1,000 yards. The only guy that did that was Deshaun Watson. He's been pretty good at NFL career so far. So, I think some of Haskins' limitations in terms of his legs and making plays, I think Kyler Murray in the end is probably the first one to go. Maybe not. That's just my gut reaction, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's number 1 overall either.
Wow. Well, lots to look forward to as the draft gets closer and closer. That quarterback battle should flesh itself out a little bit as we get closer to draft day. Now, Tim, something else about Combine Week is that it's a little bit of a free agency preview. The topic of free agency comes up a lot while we are here at the Combine. And earlier this week on Wednesday, when the coaches and GMs talked, I caught up with Ian Rapoport to talk to him about what could happen for the Lions in free agency. Take a look. Ian, we talked to you at the Senior Bowl, but we talked a little bit more draft there. Now we are approaching free agency. We heard from Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia earlier today. What are some things that you think might make sense for the Lions in free agency?
Well, first of all, I would be, based on their history, based on where these guys come from, I'd be surprised a little bit if it was a big, splashy free agency period for the Lions. First of all, I'm not sure they need that as a team. I don't think they're one player away from anything. I don't think it's going to be one player putting them over the top. Second of all, it seems more like where they would have success and where they've had success in the past has been kind of the middle class of free agency. So, I would expect a pick or signing here and there rather than, a huge splash on the first day. I also think there's a couple places they can add. I know we were talking off camera. Tight end would be something. There's going to be some tight ends available. Guys like, Jared Cook, for instance, would be available. There's some, certainly some good ones. That might be a position, maybe a complimentary running back, maybe a receiver, potential slot guy. There's places they could add, edge rusher. But I'm not sure it's going to be like the big splash.
Bob Quinn talked in his press conference today about Ziggy Ansah. He said they're still evaluating. It's more of a medical question now. But they just signed him on the franchise tag last season. What do you see happening with that this year, and what happens with Ziggy if he leaves the Lions?
Yeah, if he gets to the market, which it seems like he's at least going to get the opportunity to see where other teams value him, then, it'll be a question of, first of all, who's going to offer him the most money? And, people get to free agency a lot of times to get the biggest contract. Second of all, if the Lions are still in the mix, and it at the very least seems like the Lions are interested in monitoring that situation, do they still believe he has a high value to them? Because, sometimes what you find as a player is, you go out and you look at your value and you say, all right, well, the team that I've been on values me the most. And sometimes you come back. I haven't heard the door close there at all. I know that the Lions believed and still believe that Ziggy Ansah is a very, very talented player. It is just a matter of how available is he going to be actually on the field to play.
Another one they said they were evaluating is TJ Lang. He struggled with some injuries this season and talked after the season, said he really wasn't sure what the future held for him if he wanted to keep playing. What do you think ends up happening with TJ? Does he stay with the Lions, and how does that work?
Well, I would say this. His future will probably be best explained on Twitter. He's very good. So my guess is we'll probably find out there. But, he's in a situation where you get in for a lot of veteran players. They take a couple steps back. They see, one, do I still love it? Two, am I capable of playing physically, mentally? And three, he's due some money. He's getting up in age. Is this a situation where it makes sense for me to come back to this team for this amount of money? And if the team wants me to come back for less, for instance, is that something I want to do? And so you do see players, for instance, get released or they come to deals with teams. We've seen a couple of them. There's a lot up in the air when you get to older players who are due some money, and that's sometimes why it takes some time.
One guy they did part ways with was Glover Quinn, released him just a couple of weeks ago. Why do you think that was the move that the Lions made?
Yeah, to me, not a lot of surprise there. I mean, I think you'd always like to get younger. You'd always like to get cheaper. Glover was a fantastic player, probably undervalued player first for the Texans and for the Lions for a lot of years. I think it was time, and especially at that position. I'm not saying physically he can't do it anymore, but especially at that position with the money he was due, I think it made a lot of sense to move on and probably add some athleticism there.
Well, Combine Week is kind of free agency preview. It's something that we talk a lot about during this week. I know we mentioned position groups the Lions might be keeping an eye on. Are there any names we might keep an eye on in the coming weeks?
Well, I would say it's tough to, at this point, pinpoint names to teams. I mean, I have some in my head, but it's a great way to get on Old Takes Exposed. I would just say this, the Lions are always good for a surprise or two, and maybe not the biggest name in the world, but I will know they'll keep their eyes on everything that's going on.
And many of those conversations will be had during Combine Week when it comes to St. Elmo's, Prime 47, things like that.
All
So you'll have an ear out. Thank you so much, Ian, for spending some time with us.
All right, thank you.
That wraps up our third show from here in Indianapolis. We will have one more show for you tomorrow night as we break down all of the defensive linemen in this year's draft. Stick with us and we'll see you right back here tomorrow. For DetroitLions.com, I'm Tori Petry.